ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Yorkshire Gamer, and something I've not done for a while, troops on parade. So this is when I get a collection out on the table in its entirety and show it off to you guys so that you can see what goes into one of the armies that I put together. So this is the Papal French army for the Battle of Mentana in 1867, which was the award-winning game at Salute, the best historical games. This is half of the army that was in that, and there's just over 600 figures here, which for me is relatively small, and they are all 28mm, although different types of 28mm that we'll have a look at in a minute. And effectively there's two parts to the army. There's the French part, which is on the far side of the table, and there is the Papal part of the army. And the Papal States were quite clearly defending themselves against Garibaldi in 1867, and they were supported by the French, who we will look at very shortly. So I think probably the best thing is to get down and have a look at some of the different figures that I've used, compare scales to different manufacturers that I've used, and then with this particular process, it was quite a difficult one. In fact, it was quite old school in many ways, in that a lot of the figures for the troop types that I was using weren't available at the time that I put this army together, probably 2 or 3 years ago when I was buying and painting for it. And I've had to kind of improvise quite a bit in a number of ways, and we'll have a look at that as we go through the army itself. So let's run through the Papal army, and starting at the very top is the Commander-in-Chief, and he was in command of both the French and the Papal forces at Mentana. And this is General Kanzler. Now, no figure available for General Kanzler, as you can imagine, and these are various figures that I took from the Triple Alliance range by the Perrys. You can probably recognise the Perrys figures, and just literally went through all the cavalry from the various nations in the Triple Alliance and picked anything that looked vaguely right and went for it. The flag bearer with the general is, I've got no historical accuracy for that. That is all about tabletop recognition. And a lot of people playing this game who had no idea about the historical period. So I decided to put flags on on general basis for recognition purposes. And I think it works really well. And it really helps with gameplay when you know which general is which. The flags themselves were Ian at Flags of War very kindly put together a basic Papal flag for me. There's not a lot known about the flags for that period, and the ones I have seen are horrifically complicated. And again, if you walk up to a table, you see this Papal flag, you kind of know what it is. So there are a couple of other generals in the Papal army, and we'll have a look at those. So effectively 2 brigades of Papal troops fought at Mentana. The Papal Zouaves, which we'll look at in a moment, and the general here on your left is the general, the mounted general for the Zouaves. And again, this is a Triple Alliance figure from Perry's. I've added a little bit of green stuff on the front to get the Zouave loops, and this again, this chap here is exactly the same. He's from the Triple Alliance range with added flag, and then more Triple Alliance figures here for another base of Papal officers, which was for the 2nd Brigade. So the main force in the Papal army was the famous Papal Zouaves. Papal Zouaves, at the time, there was no easily obtainable figures. You could get some from Italy. I didn't particularly like those. So I've gone for these, and these are, the skirmishers are Perry's ACW Zouaves in metal. And oddly, the plastic set doesn't have or has very, very few kepi heads in it, and I needed kepi heads. The Papal Zouaves would or could have a backpack, just wasn't an option. I went for what was available, and these are pretty close, and it's kind of a painting conversion more than anything else, but they look really nice. These are based on 60 by 30s, 2 figures per base, and if I did it again I would extend the frontage just to protect that musket. I've had a few breakages on this army. It's been around the country, to be fair. It's done a lot of shows, but it is starting to show wear in a couple of places. So what I'm going to do now is just steady cam that over to there, and then we're going to have a look at the Papal Zouaves themselves. And these are on extended bases. They are 60 by 60 with 6 figures on, just to represent the more extended frontage of the method of fighting in this particular period. And these are ACW Zouave plastic set from Perry's, and as I said a minute ago, because there were no kepi heads in there, or just some for the officers, I've had to go for Steve Barber Models. Does a set of kepi heads in various poses, etc., and you can see the various different types as you look along the unit. And these were quite big sized units, 750 men in each one, and I've represented them with 6 bases plus the skirmishers, so 36 figures. We're looking really for this army as a figure ratio of around 15 to 1, probably slightly less for the cavalry, just to make those into viable units. There are 2, if I go shaky cam, there are 2 units of Papal Zouave in the army, plus 6 skirmishers for each of the half battalions. I use them in the game. I use 3 bases per unit in the game. So that's the Papal Zouaves. There was a couple of other units that I shall move the camera so that we can see. 2 of the units from the Papal army that fought at Mentana are these 2 here, and these are Swiss mercenaries, Swiss emigres, and then we have the Legion de Antibes and the Carabinieri Esteri, or foreign riflemen, would you believe. They are in units of 30, 5 bases of 6 figures, and they are War Games Foundry. I had to think then. War Games Foundry, French Crimean, and again they were the closest that I could find at the particular time. And the Shaco 64 are just doing a Kickstarter for these figures at the moment, which is a bit of a pain after I've already done them. But there we go. So we will just give a quick zoom in there. I have to hold this by hand, so apologies for shaky cam. Really nice uniform, the Legion d'Antibes, with the red trousers, and I think they were referred to by a French officer as the Canaries. That's what they looked like as they were marching across the battlefield. And then a more subdued uniform from the Carabinieri Esteri. Also in the Papal army at the Battle of Mentana were some artillery, and these are French artillery from the Franco-Prussian War. The great thing about Papal artillery is that it was exactly the same as the French artillery uniform, apart from the belt buckle, which obviously, as you can tell there, I have realistically painted. The rest of the Papal army, I added a couple of, in inverted commas, fantasy units. Not really fantasy units, the units that existed but weren't at Mentana, but we added them in for enjoyment. And the first one is these guys here. This is the St. Patrick's Battalion, and a very famous battalion. I always recommend Victorian Crusaders by Nick Schofield. Wonderful book from Hellion that describes the history of these guys and also of the Papal Zouaves. And these were all not Italian. They were, I do apologise, they were Irish. mercenaries or volunteers, sorry, not mercenaries, they were volunteers who came over for Ireland to fight for the Pope in 1860. So by the time Mentana came round, the people from this unit were part of the Papal Zouaves, but I just had to have the unit. And the figures from Gringo 40. It is most likely, in fact, highly likely, that this uniform was very rarely issued, if at all. I have seen photographs of people in it, but that was more likely officers buying their own kit. So if you read Nick's book on the St. Patrick's Battalion, you'll read about the disillusionment of the Irish soldiers when they arrived and were not given the proper uniform. So that's a really nice different unit there, and we allowed those on the table at Mentana Games just so that we could use, because they only ever fought at a place called Castel del Fardo, and only about a couple of companies of them fought. So I wanted to use them, and it was my game. And it won an award. Did I mention it? Right, one more unit for the Papal Army. And again, this wasn't at Mentana, but it was so fascinating that I had to have one. And it is the famous Papal machine gun. It is absolutely useless. It's called a Caxton gun, and I think only about 5 or 6 were made, and this actually still exists. It's in a museum in Brussels, which one day I really want to go and see. And it really was a very strange thing. It looks very much like a French mitrailleuse, which is what I've converted it from. But instead of having rotating barrels, what it did have, and this is I've added this to it. Don't know if you can see, there's a little kind of rocker at the back, and what it would do is you would rock that left and right, and it would fire alternate barrels. Those barrels would get hot after 12-15 rounds, I think they said, and at that point you rotated the barrel and then used the rocker switch again, left and right, and it fired alternate barrels and so on and so on, until inevitably it jammed because it was filled with bullets rather than belt fed. They just literally chucked them in a hopper at the top and hope they all went in order, and you can imagine they didn't. So this, as I say, is converted from a Perry Miniatures mitrailleuse, added the gun shield on, added a little cap to the front of it to show the layout of the barrels, and the rocker switch on the back. So that was a nice little addition to the Papal Army. So that's the Papal, guys. Let's have a look at the French. Moved over now, and we're looking at the French side of the army, and relatively small, just 5 battalions. With a tiny little bit of horse, which we'll look at in a moment. We've got the Papal horse to look at as well, and these are all Perry's Franco-Prussian War. We are 1867 with the Battle of Mentana, 1870 Franco-Prussian War. So there's very little difference between the two. And the Battle of Mentana, if you weren't aware, is the first ever use of the French Chassepot rifle. So that was quite a deciding factor towards the end of the battle, and also a great opportunity for the French to try their new weapon in combat. The vast majority of the figures are from the plastic box set, apart from the Chasseurs à Pied, the light troops, which weirdly didn't have the Chassepot. They still had their old rifled musket. And the French officers are, again, mostly from the Triple Alliance range, because they didn't really have any Perry stuff. I think the Franco-Prussian range, the Perrys have done that really annoying thing where they go half in and then stop. Hopefully they'll get other stuff out very, very soon. So let's get the camera down again and have a look at some of the units in a little bit more detail. So we'll start off with the skirmish units again. These are exactly the same as the Papal in that they are based 2 figures on 60 by 30, as you can see there. Again, if I did it over, I would extend the frontage on those to make sure that I got all the rifles protected. And so we'll just I'll show you why. Here's one I did earlier. This is one of the light units, and you can see already that the musket, or the rifle musket, has got damaged and bent and the paint's chipped off. So extended bases is something I'm always going to try and do if I possibly can. We'll just move the camera forward now so we can see the artillery. Again, exactly the same as the French, as the Papal artillery, exactly the same figures, different buckle obviously. And what I've done is to identify the two, is I've put a little, if you can see on the bottom left hand corner there, a little red or violet flowers for the French, and the Papal ones have got yellow flowers in the bottom corner. So I'll just swing this out again, and we can have a more general look at the French infantry. And these are based, as the Papal troops are, 6 figures per 60 mil square bases. And I really do like these. I think they've come out absolutely fantastic. The Perry's plastic set, they're difficult to put together because the backpack is part of the coat, so you've got to get it all lined up right, and it can at 2 o'clock in the morning when you've had a couple of beers can be difficult to put together. But you know the answer to that. Again, with these extended bases, if you can see there, you can see that protection that extended base gives. I think, you know, the only complaints I've ever heard from people are, well, where do you measure from? And really, if that's the problem, you know, we're not going to be gaming together if you're worried about that, are we? It is one of those things where I'd much rather protect my figures and work around those protections rather than worry about the odd millimetre here and there when I'm measuring. And to be fair, with a Chassepot rifle, it really doesn't make a lot of difference because it's firing all the way across the table, twice as far as your opponent anyway. So you really don't need to worry about that. So there are 4 units there that I managed to make up from 3 boxes of Perry's plastics. Added a couple, you can see some the casualty figures that I've used just to make up numbers. I couldn't quite make 24 all standing, and I do like the diorama look of that, especially of the firing line. It looks really, really nice. So I'm just going to lift this the camera up and go shaky cam again for you, and then at the back there you can see a French General, which is the one that came free with 3 boxes, and a Triple Alliance figure, and then some metal French Franco-Prussian War light infantry. So just one more French figure to talk about before we look at the cavalry, and that's the officer figure there, and I've used a cavalry figure for that. So we'll then move on to the cavalry, and there really is very, very little at Mentana, and I've really gone to town with the figure ratio here. They're probably about 1 to 10. There was 50 French chasseurs of cheval. I would imagine mostly used in scouting and messaging rather than as a fighting unit. So I've got 6 figures there, so that's less than 1 to 10, isn't it? And there was 150 or 120 Papal Dragoons. And again, I've gone for 12. So the Papal Dragoon figures are from Gringo 40, and they are absolutely massive. I think you can see there. I'm going to do a little bit of a manufacturer size review in a moment, but they are absolutely huge compared to other stuff. So I shall just zoom out. I'll move the camera out just to give you a final last look at the entire army. And yeah, proud of that. 601 figures. One thing people do always like to see is a comparison shot between the different types of figures, and I've got 3 different manufacturers here that I've used to build up this army. And on the left is Wargames Foundry, in the middle is Perry's, and on the right is Gringo 40. And these are the foot figures. From the Legion d'Antibes on the left, the Papal Zouaves in the middle and the St Patrick's Battalion on the right. Straight away you can see that there is a fairly big difference between all of them, in that the Wargames Foundry stuff is old school. These figures have been around for a long time. I think they're probably sculpted by the Perrys, and they are what I would say traditional 25mm figures. The Perrys are their usual style, absolutely superb, standard 28s, and then Gringo 40s are a lot bigger, a lot bigger. That's their own style, and I like their figures, I have to say. So what I'm going to do is just move up the Wargames Foundry and look at that compared to the Gringo 40. That is a huge difference, absolutely massive. But what I will say is that during the course of the 6 or 7 shows that this game has been to, nobody has ever said anything at the table. And I think that keeping them in separate units, I think it works fine. I think that they are perfectly compatible for a game table. Not that anybody is ever going to recreate Mentana in this scale again, but there we go. Let's have a quick look at the cavalry before we go. Here we have the cavalry, and as you can see on the left, we've got Gringo 40. On the right, we've got Perry's, and there's quite a big difference between the two. I'll swing them round to face head on, give you another kind of look at the way the figures are, and huge difference there. But once again, the Gringo 40 stuff, it's in its own unit. Nobody said anything at the various games that we had, so I'm quite happy with them on the same table in different units. Absolutely no problems at all. So there you have it. Hope you enjoyed that. That is the French Papal Army from the Battle of Mentana. I'm going to try and do a number of these over the coming days and release them one a week for a while, because I've got the Garibaldi that fought the Mentana, the French Papal at Mentana. I've got the American War of Independence stuff that I've had out recently as well, and some ACW stuff that I want to do a Troops on Parade that I haven't done on before. So thank you very much for watching Yorkshire Gamer. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. I've only got 12,000 to catch up to Alex Southern, and it would be lovely to have you on board and subscribed. It doesn't cost you a penny. Until next time, see you then.